Hey guys, Gameboy3800 here. Once again, we're back in Forza Horizon 5 for a new series of off-road racing at a Rivals event. This is going to be a very strict rule set this time around, so I'm not sure how this will be able to apply to tuning in the meta, but it's just something I thought I would do, just because it's pretty fun. Alright, so we have an Audi here, but this is just going to be the benchmark car. Why is that? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. If we look at this car stock, it has 450 horsepower. If we go over here, pretty much any classic muscle car or retro muscle car that could get to 450 horsepower with its stock engine, I did. And that was a lot of cars, trust me. If we go over here, we got the Buick. Over here, we got the Impala, the Camaro, the Monte Carlo. All these cars that are applicable have 450 horsepower, varying different levels of grip, weight, and torque. The horsepower is set, but everything else is pretty fair game, except the driveline and engine must be stock. And the car has a different driveline, like front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. It needs to be converted to rear-wheel drive. So, yeah. Let's go ahead and get this Audi up to spec. First things first, this is an all-wheel drive tune. We need to convert it to rear-wheel drive. That gives us an extra 20 points because it reduces our weight significantly. If we ever need to, what we can do is put on a rear wing to get some extra drag and reduce our points. Does it reduce our points on this one? Yes, it does. So we're going to do front aero as well. I will minimize the aerodynamics in tuning so that we get as much straight line speed as possible. I'm going to go for a 10-speed gearbox because we're going to need the extra weight because of how much weight the rear-wheel drive takes up. The standard tire compound is going to be the off-road race tire compound. And I will often go for a heavy set of rims to drop our points even more. Because we're going to be doing an off-road circuit that really needs to have at least rally suspension. I would like to be able to have the anti-roll bars. But here you see we're in the A class, so we can't have anti-roll bars for this tune. And I don't think putting on a bigger rear rim will get us the ability to put on an anti-roll bar. I will give it a try, though. No, we can't even put on one set of anti-roll bars all the way up. I mean, if I could do two, that's ideal, but we still can't tune. Yeah, we can do two, so I guess that's better than nothing. And yeah, for whatever reason, increasing the rear rim size, even with heavy rims, increases PI. Last thing I'll try to put on is a wheel spacer, just to give us a little bit more turn-in or stability. Can't get it this time, though. Our Audi is ready to go. Can't do that. And the last thing we need to do is put in a rally diff. Let's install the setup and get to tuning this car. We will not need to build any cars for the future. All the other cars are already built. So I'm just doing this to show you how I would tune. This is an off-road tune, but I have found that having some extra tire pressure from standard does help with initial bite-in and keeps the tires from overheating, so that's good to know. If I have an adjustable gearbox, I will try to tune it to give us a top speed of 150 miles an hour. With this being a 10-speed, I'm just going to lower it all the way. Usually that works. I'm going to want minimal camber on this tune because the rear tires are so skinny, but normally I'll leave it stock camber. We can't tune the anti-roll bars, but I would have the fronts at 1 and the rears at 50 because this is an off-road race. Having pretty weak low settings rather for the front anti-roll bars does help significantly with off-road tunes. For the suspension, I'll try to have the front suspension 50 points stiffer than the back. So there we go. And the ride height, I'll have around 9 inches. If it's going to be above 9 inches even slammed, then it'll be slammed. For damping, it'll be somewhere in the middle, around 10.5 to 11. Front and rear, pretty close together, so it's pretty even. Bump sniffs, I'll give it a little bit extra, say 4.5. I may add a little bit more, take some away, depending on the weight of our vehicle. And like I said, for aerodynamics, we're going to set those to minimum so we get some more straight line speed. Brakes, if I have the ability to tune them, I will often go for 5% extra braking pressure. And because we're mostly going to be upgrading the rear tire widths, what we're going to be doing is actually tuning it so that we have more rear brake bias. This is a strange rally diff. Most all the tunes will have a rally diff that looks like this, 60% on acceleration, 45% on decel, so that we get some better driving characteristics on the dirt. Before we head up to the race, there's a couple more things. If the vehicle has a clutch, so if we kept the stock drive line for instance here, we will be able to get clutch upgrades. I'm not allowed to max out the clutch. I'm not trying to test how fast the car is. Well, I am, but I would like to see how good the stock clutch is, if possible. Maybe one stage of clutch if we just have the extra point, but that's it. Likewise, I'm not using manual with clutch. We're testing the cars, not me. And lastly, if the front tire width is not at least around 200 size, like if it's a 165, I will upgrade it to be a 195 to above 200. I won't max out the front tire width ever. I'll just make it so that the front tire width is pretty consistent, between 195 and 225. Whatever the minimum, like, common ground is, you know. Gonna abandon the setup. We are good to go. Now, this is a muscle car series, pretty much. So it will be different to see what we do. But for now, this Audi is going to be our benchmark time. I have no idea how it's going to do. I just threw it together, as you saw there. Let's go into Rivals, go into B-Class. We have 450 horsepower, of course. That's always going to remain unless a vehicle with a stock engine cannot reach the top of the class, or the spec. Then that's an interesting situation. We have 415 foot-pounds of torque. We weigh 3,950 pounds. And we have a full kit of aerodynamics. Even though they're lowered, having aerodynamics even all the way lowered will be giving you some downforce, unlike the stock aerodynamics. We're doing La Selva. Alright. No goes for this file. I don't mind. I'm setting a new one anyways. Here's the difficulty settings I'll be doing. Manual, even if it's a slow shifting gearbox, we're going to have it. Traction, stability control, off. And braking line and steering is standard. Anti-lock braking on, of course. Since this is a rival driven, oh, never mind. I cannot change this to get, free difficulty bonus, whatever. Once again, here's the tune. 150 mile per hour target, most of the time. We're ready to go. I will give myself a few laps around this circuit for each car. I've driven around this track many times in like online events and rivals, but never for this kind of thing, and never in B class. Or, you know, not setting a time in B class, I should say. Here you can see we have some on-road section, but the majority of this race is in fact off-road. We have some extremely tight corners that we will need to be hard on the brakes for. I do know some try-hardy lines, and since I know them, I will be going for them. So I'll go for a very tight line there, then turn early up here. And then just have it flow into the next. Here we're not using much more than third gear. We may use fourth and fifth gear sometimes, but a lot of these cars will have 4 or 5 speed, but tuned to be around 150 miles an hour. So we'll be closer to the top of their rev range, which should be better for those big engines. This car is performing quite nicely, I would say myself. It's rear-wheel drive, but it really doesn't feel like it. Then again, we were just kind of pushing up some hills there. Coming out of these corners will be where we can tell what compromises were made if a car had to go with the skinniest rear tires and big rear rims like we did here. Because this is a drivetrain swap, we actually do have very good fast shifting. But let me tell you, that will not be the case going forward, except for maybe a couple of cars if we have the drivetrain swap, like we did for this car. This is a nice, heavy, planted car. With the horsepower being set, that does usually leave us more room for cars that would normally be power builds of mine. That would leave them room to get some weight reduction in, maybe. Or some wider tires. Or maybe an extra roll cage upgrade. All these things to improve handling. 450 seems to be a nice balance of being able to get good power and some good handling. But sometimes it's quite difficult to get to 450 horsepower, I've noticed. There's been quite a number of times, actually, where I was really struggling to get the car to 450 horsepower. Because it's exactly 450, not 449, not 451, exactly 450. So you got to find just the right combination of parts to get it to work. And then, once you get the engine built on and put the tires on, you may be in A-class. So then it's a matter of finding how much weight you need to put onto the car in order to get it back down into B-class. Sometimes it's as simple as putting in the gearbox. The gearboxes can take away quite a bit of PI. As well as the aerodynamics, at least on the rear. Most of the time that will actually reduce PI, despite giving you grip. It adds enough drag in B-class that it considers it a downside. And we have front aerodynamics on the Audi here. However, it does still seem to kick itself out a little bit. Going from all-wheel drive to rear-wheel drive will help this car from understeering, but I am still feeling its weight through some of these corners. It takes a long time to get it turned in. You can see my controller overlay in the top right. You can see exactly what I'm doing every time I do it. Throttle is obviously the top right thing going on and off all the time. With no stability control, I need to manage the throttle in order to recover from a skid like that. X and A are my shift buttons. X to shift down, A to shift up. And B is my handbrake if I ever really need to use it, but I don't think we'll be using it too often here. That was not our fastest lap that time. I went too slow up the hill at the start. A 1:35.446 is our benchmark time to beat. We're ready to go. Let's go ahead and quit the event. So I do not believe this car will be the fastest we have in the series by a long shot. It is very heavy. And, you know, we did have the compromise to build. We couldn't put on anti-roll bars, and we had to put on heavier stuff. So how are we going to do for our next car? In order to set the series up, this may be a fairly long episode, but we don't have to do any more tuning. We just have to do some driving around the circuit. 3 laps every time, shouldn't be too bad. We go back into rivals. Change rival to be myself. And now, here we are. We're going up against ourselves in this challenge. The ghost will be on so I can see my line. Today we're going to be doing the AMC cars, all of them, including the Gremlin, which, as you may notice, does not get to 450 horsepower. It gets pretty close to 423, but that's just what its engine can do, even twin turbo. It was severely nerfed from Horizon 4, where it could get almost 600 foot-pounds of torque and still be in B-class. We'll save the Gremlin maybe for last. We're going to start with the Javelin. The Javelin came out fairly recently. At least when I'm recording this. It came out like a couple weeks ago. And this had like 500 something foot-pounds of torque. Let's see here. This has the street gearbox, so I can't tune the gear ratios. That's just what was working for me with the points. Now you can see my anti-roll bar tune, see my suspension tune, the aerodynamic tune, and that'll be our tune. This was one of my first cars I built, so I did finalize the tune as I was going along. So we will double check the tune on a few cars once we're sure we got everything settled, we'll just go into them every time. How much torque does this car make? 580 something foot-pounds of torque, not too bad, maybe 586. So we make over 100 foot-pounds more, almost 200 foot-pounds more than the Audi. We're approaching 600 while that thing was just over 400. So, the Javelin, I am not sure this car can beat the Audi. I know it has more torque, and it probably weighs less as well. But from my memory, driving this car in Forza Horizon 4 around the Mud Kickers circuit, this was just not a very fast car through the corners. Granted, this time around, we are using actual race off-road tire compound. Before we were using, I think, vintage race tire compound. That was the meta there to get the most power and, you know, still being B-class. For the engines, obviously, I'm going to be trying to go for some kind of forced induction. Looks like we have a supercharger on this. If the engine, you know, putting on turbos or whatever gets us over 450 horsepower, obviously I'll try the next stage of forced induction option down, and if it still is above 450 when I put it on, then it'll be a naturally aspirated tune. There are some cars that I know are torque monsters once you put on a supercharger, like the Buick GSX and the Dodge Charger, as well as the Oldsmobile Tornado. They build up a ton of torque, but only with boost. And once you put on any kind of forced induction on those cars, then they actually go above the 450 horsepower limit, and there's no way to lower horsepower once you put something like that on, so they would be running naturally aspirated. Which isn't something I do. Normally those cars I love to have with a ton and ton of boost pressure to build up that torque number. And some cars we're going to be taking a look at have extremely different engines that I honestly didn't expect to see coming around. Like, these are muscle cars. We're expecting a high torque number, right? Almost like diesel. But some of them have way less torque than others. They're still 450 horsepower, but way less torque, and I am really curious how that's going to perform around this track. Alright, we're a couple seconds faster. So the Javelin actually did manage to pull quite the gap. I would have to chalk it up to just sheer engine power, like look at that. Same 450 horsepower, sure. And maybe a little bit better lines, like I think I brake there in the Audi. So as I learn the track, I'll obviously get faster, but there's a lot of cars to go through. I'm not sure we will ever get through all of them, but I will try my best. I'll make it maybe a weekly series on the weekends. Let me know what you guys think. Being big, heavy muscle cars, the water shouldn't affect them too much. But obviously, they won't have as much as an advantage as, say, a big off-road Ford pickup truck, you know? Oh well. Well, maybe we're not going to get a faster lap time this time around. If there is a dirty lap like that, I will count it, because I'm not wall riding. I'm just driving the car. And that time I got a little bit too wide, the car got away from me. That's not my fault, I didn't gain any advantage, so it'll stick. It wasn't faster anyways, so that's the AMC Javelin. It is the first car out of the muscle class, and it is in the lead. Still quite a number down from Stevio. I'm not sure I'll ever beat him. He has gotten extremely good lately. Like, he's been beating my times left, right, and center. I consider myself okay at this game. But him, he's really okay. Back in we go. Yeah, he's a 29-0 with the try-hard Subaru. Yeah. Not sure we'll get him, but we can try. Next up is the Rebel Machine. This has a different engine from the Javelin. It actually makes less torque and weighs more. And it says it doesn't have as good handling, so I'm not sure we're going to beat this time, but look at this. The off-road stat on this is way better than on the Javelin. Now, if you take a look at the braking, you can probably take a gander at what brakes are on what. If the braking is like around or below 4, it's probably on stock or like street brakes. If it's above 4.5 or around 5, then it's probably going to be on sport brakes. And if it's around 5.5 or 6, it's probably on race brakes. So that's the kind of tune we got going on here. Let's just go ahead and take a look. And this car has insanely wide back tires, like 375s. That's some of the widest we will see all series. Five speed. It says this engine cannot rev at all. I love that. And this is an example of where the car is completely slammed and it's still above 10 inches. And here we can see we do in fact have race brakes on. Alright, our Rebel is ready to go, or some laps around the river scramble. We are in the red line for so much. How high can the sensor rev? 6,500, not bad. 5,500 to 6,000 will be probably the top of most cars, but this one can riff higher. Like I said, most of the time we're going to actually be going for torque, so we will probably be keeping stock cams. Maybe we'll be going to street cams if we have the points to play around with, or if we can't get the 450 any other way. This is a supercharged tune. So, the off-road stat on this, I'm not sure how that affects like the handling stat in this game. Because like off-road race tires are obviously worse than like street tires, or about on par for street tires in terms of like road grip. But for off-road grip, I'm not sure how that is affected in the handling stat, you know? Oh, we're going wide once again, but this car is high enough off the ground that it can handle it. We did not almost do a front flip like we did in the Javelin. As for this car, we do seem to be maintaining speed pretty well. Obviously, first lap around, the Ghost will have quite the advantage. But now let's see where we are. Seems to be about even with the Javelin. But then it does kind of pull away there. I took brakes way too early there. We are on race brakes, I do need to remember this. So I can actually brake pretty late. I actually took a wide line there and we stayed ahead of the Javelin. That's quite surprising. Dabber brakes there. This car seems to be sliding out a little bit more. That's honestly surprising, considering how big the back tires are. I think they're 315 or 305s on the Javelin, but these are 370s, 375s, maybe even 385s. They're insane. So one last thing to consider why I chose to tune this way is because 400 seemed too low to be the limit, because a lot of cars start above 400 horsepower in this series. But I didn't want to do 500 because then the play would just be diesel swap everything, because, you know, just put on exhaust and it'll have 1100 foot-pounds of torque and like 490 horsepower. So we have beaten the Javelin, surprisingly. I guess the off-road stat does really matter in this event. We have one more lap to go. Fifth gear just seems to be like an overdrive gear in this tune. It doesn't give us much speed at all. Or 50 horsepower does seem to be a good place to be. That you can just full power out of a lot of the corners. And with these cars' big tires, it just sticks. That does make me wonder how we're going to do with the skinny tire cars, you know. Yeah, this car's handling jumps pretty effortlessly. That's probably where we were making up the time. I didn't notice it too bad on a Javelin, but I guess, you know, we got carted out wide once before. So maybe there is a bit of a drift with that car. I thought we had a little bit of twitch with this car, but I think that was just more the power band not being in the right place. A 130.7 is a new time to beat set by the machine. And the last car we're going to do is a car that is one that doesn't meet the spec and is not even in the muscle cars class, but it is cool enough and the winner of a previous series So I do have to give it its fair shot. And that is, of course, the AMC Gremlin. Yep. Everybody loves the Gremlin. It's got a V8. It's a hot hatch. It's the craziest hot hatch of all time. In real life, it's completely garbage, but, you know, in this game, if you diesel swap it or put in the Hemi V8, it's pretty stupid. But, of course, that means we are not quite going to be, you know, competitive. We're going to get back in. And the Gremlin, 423 horsepower, 523 torque. It is much lighter than the other cars, at least by 200 pounds. And its engine is completely maxed out. But we still can't get to 450 horsepower. And is this tune also pretty much maxed out in every other regard? I don't think so. Yeah, we don't have sport gearbox. We don't have race brakes, so, you know, we are still within the bounds of the rules. We don't have to race everything to get it to the top of the class. Or it's not, you know, below the top of the class because it just physically couldn't get there. We just chucked the extra points we had that we would have had for power into handling. Now this is one of the only cars we're going to be running that actually does not meet the minimum horsepower, or the spec horsepower. But it's the winner of the Scramble event series I did in Horizon 4, around the Mud Kicker Scramble. I don't know how it beat a pro-charged Oldsmobile, or, yeah, it was an Oldsmobile, but it did. So I need to give it a fair shot here with this game's tuning. Now, with everything being a set horsepower, and this one being one of the only cars that's below that horsepower, it does make me wonder about it, if it'll be able to keep up. I suspect not, but it's light enough. And it's not that much further down on power. It's not like it's at 400 only. So, maybe. Maybe it'll work. Oh no. Dang. That shouldn't affect our next lap going forward, but I do need to keep that in mind. Maybe I have to get off the power there. Oh, and I do not have race brakes for this turn. I don't think that'll have ready my next lap. Let's find out. It did not. Okay. Okay. That's different. We're quite ahead of the Rebel. Being a short wheelbase car like the Gremlin can be twitchy, and I think that's what got us before. And now we can see where the Rebel is strong. It is just ignoring all the bumps. We can actually gain on it, but it's just better through the bumps. Will that be enough for the Gremlin to take the top spot once again? Oh, this is going to be close. I'm hesitant to shift up because I know it'll bog it down. Alright, we didn't go wide and hit a tree this time. That's ideal. Oh, no. It gets pretty far ahead. Once we can put down its power, its lightness is actually really helping it. Can we run it down? No, not quite. We have one more lap. So I need to get far enough ahead that the gap can be made back up or it can't bash at all. Gonna be hard to do though. Oh no. Are you kidding me? I thought I nicked it. How didn't I get that? Again. I'm just trying to put down the power and turn tight. That's all I'm doing. There we go. I can't put down the power as well. I don't have anywhere near as big tires as that. But look at it. Its lightness, I guess, is just able to carry it through. And we're still within the same torque number, like 523 versus, like, what? 563? Only 40 pounds. The Rebel's gonna keep it. Like I said, rewinds and stuff like that. I'm not gaining an advantage by doing that. I'm just fixing a bad thing I did. But that wouldn't have even mattered anyways. The machine holds on to its lead for this episode. Next episode, we'll get into some other vehicles, some other brands. I can't wait to show you what I've done. So if you're up for everything that's set to go up, you can leave a like, favorite, comment, share, and of course, don't forget to subscribe as well. Thanks, Gambia. I'll see you all in the future.